Hey, Composing Gloves here. I'm wearing a hat. Today we're going to be talking about things you need to do to prepare yourself to do a mix. A lot of people skip out the mix prep stage, and this can really help you as you mix. So the first one is you should have a spot where you're actually going to sit down and do a mix. Some people get into mixing during their creative process. That's great. I totally encourage that. You do things, but you should really have a moment. You should have a session where you sit down and your sole goal is the clarity of the track, getting the track to sound the way you want it to. It really, really helps you just solidify what moves you want to make. So that's really good. Once you have this session picked, you should have an hour or two of silence beforehand. And you want to make sure that you don't have ear fatigue. So like if you go throughout your whole day and you're listening to really loud stuff, you may notice that in order for you to sometimes music and just loud noises in general become undesirable. Like you'd rather drive home in silence because your ear is so tired of hearing things all day. Whereas other times you may find yourself turning up the volume in order to get out of the music, get what you were getting out of the music at softer volumes earlier. This is covered a little bit in my critical listening series. You want to check out the Fletcher-Munson curves because certain frequency ranges we're actually more sensitive to, and those will cause you to get ear fatigue faster than other ranges. So, and that's also why some songs you don't want to listen to them over and over and over is because they don't jive and they emphasize those ranges in ways that are undesirable. So you want to avoid ear fatigue. So if you wake up right after you wake up from like your sleep, I don't know, maybe you sleep during the day, then when you wake up, that's good. But generally in the morning, because I sleep at night. So in the morning, when I wake up, that's when I'm in my optimal position to really get that first clean listen. There's nothing really quite like the first listen. You want to treat it with respect and dignity and really observe everything you can from that first listen because you don't get another one until the next day. But you can take breaks. So if you can, I'd take a 2-hour, or at least make sure you're in a quiet environment a couple hours before your mix. That way you could properly mix. You could also just try and deal with the fact that you have some ear fatigue. That's not a bad thing either. It's not the end of the world. But in an ideal situation, you're going to prepare yourself for this mixing session so you can get the most out of your time. And so we've got that figured out. The other thing is you want to have some water, some food, and use the bathroom. You don't want your body getting in the way of your mixing session. I've always got some water hanging around, but if you're going to a studio, they may not allow food in there or whatever. So you want to make sure that you're just taken care of because that can be very distracting while you're mixing. If you're sitting there thinking about food while you're mixing, it's not going to be that great. So prepare yourself, Once you sit down for your mix, there's only a couple more steps before you can really hop into your mix. The other step is you want to set your monitoring level. Now, there's all sorts of different volumes you can monitor at. I recommend monitoring at about 65 decibels if you're going to be sitting and mixing for a longer time. And occasionally, you should pump it up and listen to what it sounds like at like 80 decibels. Now, if I'm doing a shorter mixing session, I'll sit around 75, 80. But if I know I'm going to be in there for a while, then I'll listen softer, especially if I'm going to be coming back and mixing later in the day. I don't want to tire out my ears to the point where later it just becomes it gets harder to judge and you begin to feel it. If you've been mixing for a really long time, you start to feel it. So we'll talk about monitoring levels later in a little more detail. The other thing is a great way to find your monitoring level is find some tracks you really know. This is also critical for figuring out what the room sounds like. If you're in a studio you're unfamiliar with, get some tracks that you know what they sound like. Like they're high quality tracks. And the important thing is, you've listened to them in a lot of different locations. So you know what that track sounds like and what the space sounds like. Play that and set your level with that. And you can also take notes about the room. What is the room doing to the track? That way you can emulate it. You want a track that you want to emulate, something you want to sound like. And then you can jump into your mix after you've prepared yourself. You're gonna have a good mixing session. Your ears are in optimal judging condition. You've set your levels. You've had an example of what that room sounds like. You can really begin to dive in and start making moves, and away you go. The rest of it's workflow and understanding the principles of mixing. So these are just a couple steps. If you have some more steps that you find are very helpful, go ahead and list them below. I can't emphasize enough how much having a separate session for mixing, because I'm assuming most of you guys are author producers. So you're not there to produce a band. You're usually mixing to produce something you're writing or mix something you're writing. So generally, I like that used to be a tough line for me to follow, but when I started setting separate sessions, it got way easier. And then I might do some more creative moves, and that's fine. But having just that dedicated, set apart time to really just listen to the sound really helped me move things and put them where I want them. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe, support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.